All right. So, in a lot of different jobs in your life, you're going to have to understand that there isn't always going to be someone there to hold your hand. Case in point, before Mello left my house yesterday, I was showing her how I make my videos. And I was explaining to her that on May 1st, the ChatGPT model changed forever. And so since then, I've been on this different sort of artistic kick. The background that you guys are seeing in the background right now is hasn't been created yet. The AI model is still working on creating it. But it's a perfect example of putting yourself into a situation where you don't know what to do because you've always done it a certain way. For 600 videos, I've been able to go into ChatGPT, give it a simple instruction, create a 16 by 9 detailed artwork based on this script. Well, as of May 1st, I can't do that. Every time I give it that prompt, it generates a living room with a plant in the window and a couch. That's all it does over and over and over again. And so I've had to figure it out. I've had to figure out how to use Kriya in order to generate more spectacular AI images. And if the style stays the same, it's because the AI thinks that this is what I want. And I'm growing as an artist in order to be able to do this. Again, the art hasn't even been generated for this video, but it's becoming a much larger portion of doing this channel is doing the artwork because I've had to learn what things like 4K cinematic photography, no artistic filters, digital realism, high resolution details, DSLR style, Canon EOS R5, 85 millimeter lens, f1.4 natural light, depth of field, all of that stuff. I'm a photographer, so I know what that stuff means, but I've never used it in order to generate AI images. This entire video is based on my experience this morning where I was put into a situation where I had to figure it out. There's no hand holding, there's no way of giving you this experience. You have to pick it up as you go. Everything that I've learned in technology, I've either had to pick it up or I've had to teach myself, or I got a 5 minute crash course and this is what you do. I have no formal training in technology whatsoever. But when someone tells me to figure something out, most of the time I can figure it out. Everything in my house I've had to put together or rummage around trying to create a workaround. This extends to every facet of your life, too. Your relationships, your work, the way you live, the way you think. Even as a person who lifts a lot of weights, even your training is something that you have to figure out. There is no smoking gun for becoming a bodybuilder. I don't have these 17-inch biceps because I followed some sort of uh, program inside of a muscle magazine. This is trial and error in order to look like this. I didn't go to a personal trainer because they're very expensive, and most of the time they're just going to give you a generic program. Anytime I've ever worked with a performance coach, they always give you this little program that says do biceps, triceps on this day, do this, this, and this. And I'm like, that doesn't work for everyone. Trial and error and experience accounts for nearly every single thing you're going to do in your life, and mostly what you're going to fail at life. Because some of these pieces of art that I've created are awful, or the AI doesn't listen. I've run into this problem with the AI where it just doesn't listen. You tell it to do something over and over again, and it wants to do whatever its training tells it to do. But with that said, today's video is a little bit different. Just I want to warn you guys. I asked ChatGPT to write this script based on this is the exact prompt that I use for it to use the script. Act as a 25-year-old female high school teacher on your first day of teaching class. That's the prompt that created this script. And without further ado, let's get into our opening monologue. Nobody really trains you for a job anymore. They just hand you a key card, a login that doesn't work, and a vague wave towards your future breakdown. And when things fall apart, because they will, you're expected to fix it like you've done it 100 times before. That's not onboarding. That's hazing with a name tag. At Evil Corp, we have had people that have had such a bad experience that they can't take it. They literally say after 3 days, it's like, you know what? I'm going to do something else. We've had people who had no computer training whatsoever apply to jobs. Frightening enough, they've been hired. One of the worst case scenarios is it's this is a part of my job, but the guys tell me about this stuff. There was a woman who needed not one lesson, but two lessons on the on and off use of the button on the front of her computer. That's how little training some people get. And the other day, when I was working with my HR lady, she was so embarrassed by what I had to tell her that she needed to do in order to make her keyboard work that she asked me not to tell anyone. And I told her it'd be our little secret because she was so embarrassed that I had to walk her through the very basic parts of getting her keyboard to work. I mean, I once had a lady who I had to tell her that she needed to get new batteries for her keyboard. And when she asked, how do I get the batteries out? She said, I can't get the batteries out. And I told her, go get a screwdriver. And she went, she got the screwdriver, and she's like, it's not working. And I said to this, and these are exact words of mine, just jam it in there and push it out. And so I could hear her get aggressive with it. I heard the bang, and boom, the batteries kept flying out. And she's like, oh, that worked. I'm like, yes, it did. Look, that's learning by experiencing. No one's ever going to train you on how to put the batteries in your own keyboard. It's part of life, figuring out these things. Talking point number one. Most people don't get proper onboarding. They get a login, a broken printer, and a supervisor who ghosts them until they mess up. Companies save money by skipping real training and relying on your desperation or fear of being fired to figure it out alone. My boss has a saying, sink or swim. It's not a training program. It's not, hey, we're going to coddle you. It's, can you do this or can you not do this? And when it comes to senior managers, well, there's been a lot of them because what you're asked to do on a daily basis sometimes is out of your experience. And this is why corporations would prefer to hire experience over college. I spent half my life going to university. Half. Not a couple years, not 3 years. I've been at the university since I was 16 years old. I don't know anything about anything else other than being a college student, doing research, and being an academic person, right? But that doesn't pay the bills, people. It's figuring out that pays the bills. When I ask Gen Z, hey, I need you to do this, and he just looks at me like, what? You're just kind of like, do this. And he just says, I don't know. And I'm just like, you don't know? That's not an answer. I don't know is not a good answer because, and this is the worst part, is that no job can ever put everything that you need to be able to figure out at work into the job description. That's why they sneak it in there with other duties as assigned. And other duties can mean 1 minute you have your hand inside the toilet and you're unclogging it and you are disgusted by what you're doing, but your hand's still in that toilet because you still need to make money. In fact, oh my God, when I was working at Walmart, one of my supervisors, classic need to figure it out moment. So his boss, the general manager, says to him, "Hey, I need you to fix the Coke machine because it seems to need some sort of cleaning." He had no idea. We'd just gotten that Coke machine in the store a few days earlier. I don't know why it was so dirty. But he went in there and he was unplugging the hose to like the part that, the really dirty part. If you don't ever have to use a fountain machine, don't. So he pulled on some hose and it sprayed him with like a liquid that smelled like raw sewage that was connected to the machine. He's tried all day to get that smell off of him. Trial and error all day. He even went out to his car and got a fresh shirt and he still smelled like whatever got on him. Why? He didn't have the experience. His boss expected him to figure out how to fix that Coke machine without showing him, just telling him. And that's what corporations want. They want workers, regardless of the age, to be able to show up on day one and not say, I don't know, or just know, or show me how to do this. Sometimes the people that are in charge will ask you to do things that they don't themselves don't know how to do. More often than not, when I have made the mistake, again, a younger version of me who said, I don't know because I didn't have experience at the time, your boss will Google search what they expect you to do and tell you how to do it, and then just send you a cut and paste straight from Google. And you're just like, well, if it was that easy, why would I be asking? And you still have to end up figuring it out by yourself. I, I'm going to use a terrible example here. But the first time that the turtle's going to get mud on it, and she's just like, do you know what you're doing back there? And you're like, well, this is the oldest profession that you're in right now, and I think that we can figure this out. And that's when the crying starts. I hate to use that experience. Even when Fleece comes a knocking at 8 a.m., typically on a Monday morning, you know he's got the experience. And you know that you've experienced this too. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy. And it's not going to be fast. That's what the work day is. All day long is you just assume the position on your desk and work has its way with you. But it's better that you know. It's the devil you know, right? We all know who Fleece is. We know what equipment Fleece has. And we know from experience that we just have to do it. Want money? Fleece got Fleece knows it's more important than water and food. So you better be prepared. Experience. When jobs say they want experience, what they really mean is we don't want to train you because no one trained us either. The cycle of survival mode labor continues, especially in education, retail, technology, and healthcare. I've only ever really worked as a professional job. I've only ever worked in technology. Sure, I've spent my years stocking shelves at Walmart, at Kroger's, working fast food. You know, you name it. Every crummy job a person has to work while they're looking for a better job. And there's one thing for sure is that the training is definitely lacking. Um, there was at least 100 times over the 2.5 years that I worked at Walmart where my supervisor would be like, Millennial Steam, I'm tired of training new cashiers. And I would look at him like, well, if you're desperate enough to look for work at Walmart, chances are you're not going to be dealing with the brightest and best that our society has to offer. So you're training someone that's probably semi brain dead, or the worst part, when I was doing my psychology degree, we had an entire course on motivation and training, right? Probably the most functional class out of all of my psych classes. That class was probably in the top three of classes where you actually learn something useful. The learner that's unmotivated is the most difficult, near impossible person you're going to get to learn something new. And that's across the board. Because let's face it, I don't like working in technology. I don't like computers. I wasn't the nerd that most of my nerdy coworkers were in high school. I didn't get a computer until I was 23. I didn't get my first computer until I was 23 years old. And I started work my own computer, right? I started working in computers when I was a teenager, but I couldn't afford my own computer. And you're asking, Millennial Steve, how did you not own a computer until you're 23? It's simple. They were very expensive back then. And I trained myself on how to use a computer, ironically, in college at the computer lab every Saturday and Sunday for years. I sat at a computer learning to use it. My first computer at the school was a Intel 100 megahertz computer. They had just replaced the 486s with these Intel computers. And if you've ever used a 486 before on Windows 95, they are extremely, really. You could start that computer and go get coffee and come back, and it'd just barely be booting up. But that's how I taught myself how to use computers. One of my favorite things to do with the computer back then was I discovered Photoshop. And I had to just learn how to use the computer. I wasn't smart enough to take a computer science class. I tried. I failed computer science 103 times, and they wouldn't let me take it anymore because I knew nothing about computers. My household, my Hispanic upbringing, did not have any technology whatsoever. I mean, I remember trying to teach my parents how to use the VCR, and even that was challenging because, again, when you grow up in a household where everyone you meet is uneducated and any answer that your parents can't understand is, well, it's in God's hands now. It was always about God. My mom didn't know what we were going to do when something bad happened. It's like, oh, it's in God's hands now. Or when I asked my mom if we were going to crash while we were driving to Mexico, she's like, it's in God's hands. I hated that answer so much as a child because it just was so lazy. But anyhow, I digress. Let's get into our final talking point before I run out of time. In toxic workplaces, you either learn fast or you get left behind. People who improvise without guidance often carry the weight of the whole team, while those above them pretend like they provide support. This creates burnout disguised as initiative. Number one place where I learned that this happens is it was the job that I had right before before the pandemic hit, right before we all got let go from our jobs, and I took that job at Insight, and they gave us a crash course on a new client. This client was a medical company based out of Ireland. No one really knew what they were doing, right? The training was so terrible that all of the other computer people that I worked with at this call center, well, I was the person who had to clean up the tickets at the end of the night. Anywhere from 50 to 100 tickets. Every single night, I got left with all of the cherry picked tickets, right? None of the other people were real computer people. So they would take all the easy tickets, the password changes, the VPN issues, and then application support and figuring out where the rest of the tickets went was always on me. And it got to the point where I would get in heated arguments with the management at Insight because every night I had to do the hardest tickets every single day for months at a time because they didn't have anyone else. So when I got kicked off that account because they didn't like my attitude, I was like, you know what? It's their loss. When my boss passed me months later and he said, we lost that account because they didn't want you working for them, I was like, hey, you know, if I can carry the entire client by myself because the other guys aren't doing crap, well, You know, it's not my fault. It's not my fault that you hired those people. And my boss would come up to me sometimes and say, "You're too good to work here." And I'm like, "Do you think I'm here because I want to be here? Do you think I want to work in a call center? Do you think I like talking on the phone?" No, most people don't want to do that job. But if you're going to do that job, own it, do it. Don't just show up and don't do your job, because learning to do that job was probably one of the most complicated things that I have had to learn in doing technology, because it wasn't just one thing. I had to learn everything about the way that they administered their software, their hardware, and then their programmers. I had to know where every single thing in my ticket queue went every single day. I didn't get to do the password resets. I didn't get to do any of the low level support. I always had to do the stuff that nobody else wanted to do. And every once in a while, I'd get stuck. And my boss, this was his default answer to when I would tell him, it's like, I don't, this doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, will somebody please reset his password? And then he'd walk away. That's what his answer was. His cookie cutter answer was every day, because he obviously didn't know. He was a supervisor over 6 or 8 different clients, but he never knew how to do anything. And he just relied on people in every group. He had a person like me. Every single group. If a group lost its leader, like after I left, and his group leader put in a 2 weeks because he found a job that paid twice as much, he he was out. He was, people like that. Once your manager discovers that you're relying on people on the ground to do the work, you're gone. Sometimes people can cover for other people, sometimes they can't. And if you get exposed like that at any job, you're not going to be there long. And this, and if you're going to take anything from this, it is that you don't always have to let it happen to you. Is that when they ask you to do something and you know how to do it, you don't always have to tell them that you know how to do it. Sometimes you can figure it out and just tell them, just, there's, I don't know, a few hundred things that I do on any given day where I just figure it out and I move on. Whether it's working on YouTube, at work, or in the wiring closet this morning. Like, the style that I gave ChatGPT today in order to write this, has nothing to do with anything that I just said. This is like I said, this is a prompt from a school teacher. But this is the way that I felt about walking into the closet this morning at work. It's just, you look at a machine, you have no idea how it works, and you got to make it work. So here's my closing monologue. You don't become good at your job because someone showed you how. You become good because you panicked, Googled, cried in the supply closet, and still showed up again the next day. We all start lost, but if you're still standing, still figuring it out, that means you're already doing the job better than half the people who act like they were trained how to do that job. So, for some reason, while I was reading that, I got this image of the first time that my coworker that I was with the other day said to me, he's like, "Millennial Steam, do you ever start drinking beer when you're in the shower so that you can get started earlier?" And I told him, it's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "It's called a shower beer. So when you stop working and you go home and you're about to get into the shower so you can get clean yourself up before you go to sleep, you start drinking in the shower." I'd never heard of that before. Like, I didn't even know that was possible to start drinking in the shower. Now it's pretty much a regular thing for me. Like, I get home and it's become a thing. And when you hear things like this, you're like, why had I never thought about this before? Because you don't have the experience. That's why.